Are you ready to hit the road toward a fresh start? Kimball Recycling and Disposal is hiring local CDL drivers and mechanics, and this could be your year to join their team. Imagine what new possibilities you could explore with a sign-on bonus of up to $5,000. That's right, new hires get a sign-on bonus of up to $5,000. If you're a CDL driver or mechanic ready for a new opportunity in the new year, head to kimballcompanies.com/careers and apply today. Kimball, recycling and disposal done right. Welcome to Talkin Trash, where we try to answer all of your questions about recycling and proper waste disposal in Tuscarawas County. I'm your host, Hannah Hartman, and joining me is my go-to expert on all things recycling here in Tuscarawas County, my sister, Rachel Rodacher. Hi, Rachel.
Hello.
Rachel is a passionate advocate for recycling and sustainable practices, and she has worked in our local recycling industry for several years, so her behind-the-scenes knowledge about how to recycle properly in Tuscarawas County is vast, and it's what will guide our ongoing discussions here on the Talkin Trash podcast. This episode is being recorded on November 12th, 2024, and because rules and regulations change over time, some of what we discuss may have changed by the time you hear this, but with that caveat, Rachel, let's dumpster dive into this discussion. Okay. We always like to start with the basics in case somebody's tuning in for the very first time to Talkin Trash. So what are the basics of recycling properly in Tuscarawas County?
Sure thing. I always tell people to give me a high five because there's 5 categories of basic items that would be accepted in your curbside bin or at a public drop-off, and that includes paper products, cardboard boxes, plastic bottles and jugs, metal cans, or other containers, tin cans, things like that, and glass bottles and jars.
Okay, those are the basics, which takes us to our next section, which we call Where Does It Go?
Yes.
And we've already covered the basics. This is now episode 8 of Talkin Trash, and as we just discussed, there's only really 5 basics, and we've covered all of them in the previous episodes, Rachel. So we're trying to get into some of these more nuanced discussions. There's a lot that goes into recycling properly. I think any of us who really try hard are often disappointed that more things aren't recyclable. But that doesn't mean there aren't special places that these items can go. Maybe they can't go in your curbside bin.
Yes.
Maybe they can't go in a public drop-off. But that doesn't mean that you should necessarily just throw them in the trash. So I want to talk about batteries. Okay, now this is maybe a little vast. There's a lot of different types of batteries. I'm sure this nuanced discussion could get even more nuanced because of the different types of batteries. But we're kind of going to do a general gist of where do batteries go, or where should they go? What should people do when they have dead batteries?
Okay, well, this is good. And you already alluded to the first thing I was going to say, which is that even though some batteries are a recyclable type of material, it does not mean that you should put them in your curbside bin or at the public drop-off sites. These are things that will require having the metals extracted. They're going to require something more than just throwing in a pop can, let's say, as an example. So they are a metal, if you think about it, they have heavy metals in them, but that does not mean you should include them in the metal cans. That's why I was thinking, what other metals? Really, it's cans is the main one. You should include batteries. You should not. But the deeper you get into the batteries, you really want to think about them in terms of 2 different categories. And that would be you have what are called primary or single-use batteries, and you have rechargeable batteries. So that sounds simple, right? It doesn't always, it isn't always as simple, because maybe you think about single-use batteries. These would be typical AA's, AAA's, C, D, whatever, 9 volts, things like that.
Yeah.
You think, okay, well, that's easy. That's not that easy, because actually even those different sizes can be made of different types of metals, and whatever metal is in the battery kind of dictates how you need to responsibly dispose of it. So back to what I said initially, a lot of these can be recycled, but you have to take them special places. Right. And unfortunately, the single-use primary, like alkaline batteries, there's not a local place where you can take a bunch of those. Okay. They're totally safe to dispose of in your household trash. Okay. So the alkaline ones, that's kind of a safe bet that, okay, if these are used up, unless you want to pay to order a special battery recycling box through a website like Call to Recycle is one example, but there's more. You can order a box, you can fill it up, you can mail it in. If you are that dedicated, my hat's off to you. But I personally, if I have these ones, I don't actually recycle them. I've been throwing them away. Yeah. Now, the thing I wanted to comment on is that you can switch to rechargeable versions.
Yeah.
And so that kind of starts to fall under another category. But the more you can switch, the less waste you'll produce. So that's good. Okay. But then even thinking of primary and single use, alkaline is kind of handled differently than like lithium-based batteries. Yeah. So if you think of those little like button cell batteries that go in small electronics or anything that says lithium on it, keep that in mind, because lithium, even if you think the battery is drained, if you have two ports essentially coming together or two poles coming together that are lithium, they can create a spark, they can create a fire. It's actually one of the most common reasons there's fires in recycling and waste trucks.
Well, that you took the words out of my mouth, because that, when we're talking less about recycling batteries and more about disposing of them properly,
yes,
in a sense. And this is exactly why I thought it was an important topic, because, you see these stories of dump trucks catching on fire, people, their phones exploding in their pockets. Like these batteries can pose a fire hazard, especially when we're talking about improper disposal.
Well, yeah, and the one that I think is the most interesting is those little button cells, because you wouldn't think that they're big enough to do anything. But if you think about it, the way that you purchase them is that they're not all making contact with one another. They're all separate. So that's a good rule of thumb with batteries, is like, how did it come to you? Did it come where it wasn't making contact? Because if so, you want to try to keep that throughout its life cycle. That way you don't accidentally cause a fire. But regardless, so that's kind of the primary single use, is like a lot of, it depends if it's alkaline, or there's a few other metals that the EPA doesn't consider hazardous. But the lithium you'll want to watch for. Okay,
so let me continue with that. So let's say I have a lithium battery. Mm-hmm. I believe that it is dead. I don't know. Maybe it does still have a little bit of a charge. I don't know, but I believe it's dead and I'm done with it. Mm-hmm. Should I not throw it in my trash? Should I wrap it in something before it? Like, what is the proper way to dispose of that?
That's a good question. They actually do recommend that it sounds wasteful in another way, but sometimes you got to do that to be safe. First, but is that you either individually bag them, depending on the size or whatever of the batteries, or what they used to do up at the Canton Recycle Center when they used to take these types of batteries is they would get like a big long piece of tape and then place each of those button cells on that, and then put a second piece of tape on top and seal it around the edges so that they couldn't make contact. I mean, there's special kinds of tape too, like the electric tape, you're not going to get something going through it, but they use some kind of wide tape up there. But so you really are supposed to throw them away. Either if you throw one into a bag of trash and it's the only one in there, that's probably safe, but think about it. Then it might get mixed with other people's bags of trash.
So basically it would behoove us all to really just wrap it in tape. Or you said bag it, but basically wrap it in something so that there's no way it can make contact with something else.
And that is specific more to the lithium. But if you do have alkaline, or I do have a list in front of me of some others, there's silver oxide, zinc air, zinc carbon, and zinc chloride. Like those ones, the EPA doesn't actually consider those as hazardous or as desirable for recycling. Actually, they think they're pretty safe to throw away. But anything with lithium in the name, you're going to want to pay attention to. And then kind of similarly, there's a few other types of batteries that are rechargeable, and they're in different types of devices. So again, we could have this is an episode kind of devoted to batteries. We could have multiple ones if we wanted, but there are nickel metal hydride batteries, which would typically be found in like power tools or digital cameras. Okay. There are nickel cadmium batteries, which would be in, again, power tools, cameras. This one says two-way radios or cordless phones, which is kind of an interesting addition. There's lithium ion batteries, which would be in like cell phones, laptops. Think about the sticker you see on a box if you ever order a new phone or a laptop or something. There's that sticker that has a lovely picture. I'm looking at it right now. It's a picture of batteries, and then one of them has a crack in it and a fire shooting out of it. So if your device came in a box with that kind of sticker, you can bet that that's the type of battery that's
trying to tell you something.
It's a hazardous battery inside, and that sticker's on there because of the mail carriers, and they want them to be protected of how they're storing these and the temperatures and whatnot. So, and then there's also small sealed lead acid batteries and just lead acid batteries. So the small sealed ones are actually the ones found in like emergency exit signs and in smaller, I want to say like kids' power cars.
Oh,
like
okay.
think about things where, okay, it's a car, but it's a tiny version. Here's the small lead acid battery versus a big lead acid battery. So this one says mobility scooters. So that's another example, kind of a small thing. But lead acid batteries are kind of interesting in their own way because they, that would be the types of batteries like in your cars and trucks and things like that. And they're actually not permitted to be thrown into a landfill. So they actually have one of the highest recycling rates. Of anything because you're not allowed to just go throw them away in a landfill. So as a resident, you have a lot of leeway and you can throw away almost anything, but you can't throw away lead acid batteries if they can see it. Like if you have it commingled, they don't know. Or whole tires. That's another kind of interesting example. But yeah, I think that's fascinating that they have such a high, I mean, it's a high rate, but it's because you can't
just not allowed to throw it away.
No, and because they're not allowed to be thrown away. One, there's the hazard element of it, batteries leaking and whatnot, but also because they're easy to recycle, presumably.
Well, great.
So yeah, we have, but anything other than like a large lead acid battery, these other ones I mentioned, nickel metal hydride, nickel cadmium, they are rechargeable. You shouldn't just throw them away. There are stores like Lowe's, Home Depots, Best Buys, places like that have a bin where you can drop those off. And at the store, there's instructions for like how they want you to leave it there.
Okay. Yeah. So. See, well, because again, we're in the where does it go, where should it go section of the podcast. It kind of depends on the type of battery we're talking about.
Yes.
Because my next question was going to be for any of these categories of batteries. Would an e-waste event, like an e-waste collection event, be appropriate for any of these types of batteries?
Again, not like alkaline or ones that really have valuable metals in them like them. But yeah, these rechargeable ones, some of the e-waste recyclers will take those as well.
So just kind of keep your eyes peeled for those special events if you've got.
Yeah. And the EPA has so many resources. Like if you just Google, EPA, Ohio battery recycling, it will give you a lot more detailed information about these. But it is interesting because like another thing you'll want to note with these is is the battery like removable from the device? Because some devices like a cell phone or certain laptops, like you can't take it off. They don't want you to be trying to take that off of there in order to try to like take it to a recycler. You actually have to recycle the whole device, which is why, again, a lot of those e-waste recyclers, they want the whole cell phone. They want the whole laptop. Imagine if you try to remove it and then you damage the battery and now you have...
Now it's useless.
Useless and could be leaking or, you never know. So yeah, keep that in mind as well.
Okay, well, let's then move on to, is that all of the information you had for where does it go?
It's a very quick and dirty version.
Well, let's move on to our common questions section of the podcast. And maybe we kind of just hit on this, maybe not. I wrote, how should you store batteries, both dead ones and fully charged ones? Because I guess it sounds like maybe just put a piece of tape on, like if you assume they're dead and you're maybe saving them to take to an event or something, or if you're not going to just throw them in the trash, like I have when I have like a battery that is dead, I just keep it in like a little jar in a drawer because I think, okay, I need to take this somewhere special. I can't just throw it in the trash, except now I'm learning that I probably can just throw it in the trash if we're
certain
about,
ones. That's
but I do always think like, should I be doing something more? Again, I'm thinking I don't want this to spark a fire. So what I'm really imagining, Rachel, is like AA batteries that have served their useful life for my purposes.
Yes.
I keep them in a little jar. But at this point, I'm thinking I could probably just throw them in the trash when I'm done with them, right?
I mean, again, I would stress if it's alkaline, at least, if it's alkaline. But if there's anything with lithium in it, again, these sizes aren't necessarily indicative of which metal is in it. So as much as painful as it is, and I know it is, you're supposed to try to study the battery before you do anything with it. Read the label if it says on the label. The problem is sometimes it doesn't say it. And I would say err on the side of caution, where if it doesn't say it, then treat it as though it's hazardous and bag it by itself or tape it off.
Going from that, treat it as if it's hazardous.
Yeah.
So if I have some dead batteries, or like, let's say I have some batteries that for whatever reason, like they're fully charged, but I took them out of their original packaging.
Okay.
Maybe I just have a little space where I keep some batteries I can grab real quick. do I need to be cautious about how I'm storing those? Again, like
depending on the type.
It's always going to come back to it depends, right?
Yeah. But again, I'll point you to like, how did you purchase it? And if it was stored with a bunch of other ones, like the typical Duracell or, Energizer, then those are safe to be together because they already were together. Okay. But I know the rule of thumb is generally, yes, those typical household sizes are usually not a dangerous type of. Okay. As long as they're not tampered with and someone tries to break them open or something, then that's a whole different issue. But
I think I'm storing them in a way that's not.
I'll come study it at your house. How's that?
Come on over. All right. All right. Well, let's move on into our dumpster diving section where today, Rachel, we found. I'm actually really glad we found this because this is one that I always have to like stop myself and think when I'm at home. I use sprays to, spray off my kitchen counter, spray off the sink in my bathroom, like different spray bottles, right?
Yes.
When it's done and used up, I always stop myself as I'm about to throw it in my recycle bin and go, is the spray part, like the spray nozzle, the whole thing that makes the sprayer part, is that part of it recyclable? Like I feel confident I know that the like actual bottle part of it is, but if I leave that spray top on it,
yes,
is that actually recyclable or not?
Well, you're not supposed to include them. I'll say that. Okay. Like it is a type of plastic, but it's a different type than the rest of the bottle. Okay. And again, think about what we've talked about prior episodes with the material recovery facility, where how will that even end up at the end of the line, that little hose part, if it gets separated? Like the one that we got from the dumpster when we went dumpster diving, actually, I was pleased to see this. It actually does have there's the how to recycle labels on several products. Great. Not all of them have them, but when they do, they can be very telling. So this one even says to empty and remove sprayer.
Oh, okay. So it tells you straight on there.
And then it says to take off the plastic label, which I find interesting. Usually that breaks off on its own. I would say I've never seen people go to those lengths, but something I will comment on these is that the way it depends what they hold too. So I've mentioned in prior episodes, like the rule of thumb about like if you can get it at a grocery store, that's usually a good rule of thumb for what they're after at the material recovery facility. So like this one specifically was a cleaner for stovetops, which I would think you could find at a grocery store. So as long as you give it a rinse, it should be okay. But think about something maybe that had like motor oil or something you wouldn't get per se at some stores do have motor oil. That's why it's called a rule of thumb for a reason. But anything that had like a hazardous material, you might want to stop and just kind of look at what it was and think about how you get rid of that. Like a cleaner where you're going to use water and you feel safe, like you could dump it down the drain, and that's probably okay. But something that really sticks to the inside of a bottle and you can't get it clean, they don't really want that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's move on to our What's the Word section. And we want to talk about a term that, I'm not sure how common this term is. It was kind of a new one when you suggested it to me, but I think it's one worth talking about. So what does the term universal waste mean?
Yes, this one actually came to mind because we were thinking about just using single use, and that's kind of obvious. So I said, well, let's go the opposite way. We'll go with something that's not that obvious at all. And in fact, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to assume that you find this stuff interesting. So this will be interesting to you, but you can tune out for a second if you don't. But this is a deep dive. So universal waste is essentially a category of waste in the country, but also in Ohio, there's some specific ones too, wherein it's handled and disposed of and transported. It's a laxer requirement than typical hazardous waste. All these items on this list of universal waste all have potentially hazardous properties to them, but they've been deemed not dangerous enough to put the company who's producing the stuff to the same standard of what would be hazardous materials. Okay. So essentially, clear as mud, right? The list here, don't think about residents producing these because, again, as a resident, you're not subject to the hazardous waste laws. You can throw almost anything away, which is sad, but
maybe problematic in some sense, but
it's problematic, but it's in part, it's due to the volume you produce of the stuff. So in this case, again, it's kind of about how much you're producing, but these items on this universal waste list are ones that almost every business that operates are going to produce, but not in these huge volumes. So here's the list. I'm going to read it because I couldn't remember a few of them. So there are 5 that are considered universal waste nationally, and that's lamps or mercury-containing light bulbs, essentially. That's pesticides. That's mercury-containing devices. So I think thermometers and things. Okay, yeah. Batteries, and aerosol cans. And they have, think about an aerosol can. They have the potential to, if they're punctured, they can, cause an issue. They can kind of hurt people. And then there's 2 more that were added to the list specific to Ohio, which is antifreeze and paint or paint-related waste, which I thought was interesting. But I just think it's kind of fascinating to think, and batteries is the reason I thought of this for this episode, because you do have hazardous waste or normal solid waste. Here's this universal waste. So let's say that people listening to this podcast, maybe you're not as worried about batteries at the household level, but let's say you're in charge of disposing of some of this stuff at your church or your school or your business. I want people to be aware that the items in this category, there still are some requirements about how you dispose of them, but they're laxer than if it were truly a large volume of hazardous waste. Okay. Like one example I can think of that comes to mind, where I used to work, we had schools that would approach us about helping to dispose of their chemical lab packs through their science class. Like that's a hazardous waste and it needs treated as a hazardous waste. Conversely, we would have government offices, schools come to us and say, I have a bucket of alkaline battery, or, I have a bucket of batteries. That would be handled differently than the chemicals. So,
okay. Well, so universal waste, kind of I was going to say a specific term, or I guess it's...
Here's kind of the definition, if this helps. Okay, I have it in front of me. So it says the universal wastes are specific hazardous waste streams that a generator can choose to manage in an alternative manner in place of the more complex hazardous waste requirement. These wastes are typically generated by numerous businesses, ordinarily in small quantities, and they present a low hazard.
Okay, yeah.
So...
There we go.
That might help.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
There you
go. Awesome. Okay. Well, then let's move on to our simple solutions section. And we kind of already talked about the one, which is, here's a simple solution if you use batteries, which is pretty much everybody. Buy the rechargeable kind. In fact, I just bought more because I had like 4 and I was using them constantly. And I was like, I think I just need to get more. So I just recently bought some more rechargeable batteries. And I'm all about the reusable, rechargeable, all that kind of stuff. I don't like producing waste. And so it's, they are maybe a little bit of an investment. Plus you have to get the actual charger, but it's like anything. You make that initial investment and then it pays off itself over time. So.
And, I'll laugh because at my house, I have some of both because I have heard that the rechargeables work better in something that is constantly drawing some amount of power.
Interesting.
So I'm not sure of the science behind that. So I don't claim to be a scientist in that. But I have found that they seem to last longer and work better when it's something like a clock or a remote or like something that you're using all the time.
Like these things that I'm always going to be putting batteries in. I might as well just get the rechargeable one so I'm not constantly buying batteries for them.
Well, plus think about it. Once you get the rechargeable, they're no longer that alkaline one you can just throw away. Now you have to actually take the rechargeables once they're not working anymore because there's an end life to everything, So it gets harder to actually properly recycle them using the rechargeable. So it's kind of that balancing where you're like, well, how many can I afford to throw away versus how many do I want the hassle of disposing of properly?
There's Rachel with the unfortunate reality.
I know, the wet blanket.
But this kind of is the world of recycling where there's no... Short of just not producing waste, there's no 100% solution for anything.
Right. I mean, who can live without a cell phone? Sure, you wouldn't need to charge the battery in the cell phone.
It's going to be a trade-off either way. So one other simple solution I just wanted to throw out there, because I found this product at a store and was like, I have to have it. It's called a Battery Daddy. And it's kind of like a little suitcase that has like... the different sizes of like batteries. You got your AA's, your AAA's, all the different ones. Like it has special compartments for each of them. So it keeps them separated safely and it keeps them all in one place. And I just love it so much. So if you know Hannah, she likes her organization. It's a big deal for me. So, but I do like the part you said that it's designed for this. So at least it is designed with safety in mind. Yeah. And that's what I liked, again, going back to I'm not really sure if I'm storing these batteries in a safe way. Well, look at this great product that I just happened to come across. Okay, I got to have it. So if you're into that kind of thing, check out the Battery Daddy. It's very, very handy. Okay, Rachel, during our last episode, we launched a new section of the podcast called Junk in the Trunk. And so I'm curious what junk you had in the trunk today.
Well, the ones I was going to talk about today, and anyone can relate to this, but I'll say especially mothers with young children who are constantly growing out of clothes and shoes. Mine were bags of clothes and shoes, but specifically it was clothing that I didn't really deem and shoes that I didn't deem in good enough condition that I thought someone would want to reuse it. Okay. So this is a specific one, and I have to take them farther than I'd like to because you can order kits online if you want to pay to recycle shoes or clothes. You can order from Call to Recycle, that same company, or there's others. However, there are some good companies. DSW Shoes, they have this, it's not reuse a shoe, it's called Soles for Souls. And technically, they want shoes that can be reused, and because what they do is they ship them to other countries and find people and they help them establish businesses and sell the shoes. And it's this economy thing and also like a mission driven company. However, they do attest, so hopefully they're being honest, but they do attest that if you donate shoes that are just not in good enough shape, that they do get recycled, or depending on the product in the shoe, some of it did say waste to energy. So I would still deem that better than landfilling. Oh, okay. Depending on the item in the shoe. But yeah, like rubber, that's a recyclable. They can recycle that. And then clothing is kind of similar, where even if you think about companies that are like bigger companies that accept clothing donations, they don't want to just throw stuff away if there is some market for it. So if they have a market for scrap fabric, then they will recycle scrap fabric. So I can't say that, again, depends on the day you're listening and what the markets are doing. But if there is a market for it, they're going to want to get something for it. So I usually will take mine to like local Goodwills or places, but I usually will mark on the bag that it's scrap fabric.
Okay. Yeah.
That way they maybe don't have to waste the time of like laundering it or whatever they have to do. Yeah. Now, there's always the rules of thumb, right? You don't want to donate something that's soaking wet or that has bodily blood or, something in it. You don't want something that's just already tattered and shreds. I don't think they could do something with that. But if you have something that you're holding it and you're like, I wouldn't want another person to take this, but I don't really want it. I don't think it needs to just be thrown away because it's clean and whatever. Then I recommend those methods. Again, there's different stores that do it. The ones my junk in the trunk went to Goodwill and DSW Shoe Warehouse. However, I'm sure there's others. So it just depends how far you want to go.
I think if you do even just a little bit of research online, you can find specific companies that will take specific items that aren't in their best shape. Because they're trying to also do what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep this stuff out of landfill. We're trying to get as much use out of it as possible. Like you said, there are mission-driven organizations out there. So a little bit of research can go a long way. But, so many things we talk about, you might have to take an extra step. It might not be the most convenient thing, but hopefully not too inconvenient.
And I'm trying to find my list in front of me and I can't, but it is fascinating to read about what the stuff becomes too, because like the rubber from shoes can become like athletic flooring or, something. So there'll be specific uses for the fabric or the textiles or the shoes. So I don't know. I think it's good to do it. If you think you have to drive 100 miles or something to do it, I wouldn't recommend it just from a climate standpoint.
Again, trade-off, right?
Yeah. That's why I tend to put stuff in my trunk. It becomes junk in my trunk until I'm near one of those places.
There you go.
And it's a, two birds, one stone situation.
There you go. All right. Well, then that's going to take us to our last section, the good news section. And Rachel, I was surprised when you brought this good news because I hadn't noticed it myself yet, but why don't you share the good news?
I will. I wasn't looking for this, but I was going to get some lasagna noodles at a grocery store and there was no little plastic window on them. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. And then right on the side of the box, it says, where's the window? And then it says, this company, we're passionate about building stronger and healthier communities. And a key part of that is a commitment to significantly reduce the amount of single-use plastics in the stores, which includes product packaging. So the plastic film window on this box has been removed in support of the initiative. So I thought that was good news. It's small steps, but at least these bigger companies are starting to hear the message and trying to pivot and make adjustments that they can.
And you just kind of think like, I know what I'm getting. Do I really need to see it through a plastic window, or can I just open the cardboard box and then now we have one recyclable thing and we don't have
that one did perplex me because I had to think like, was there a time when people were like putting non-pasta in the pasta and people wanted to see it? Like, I don't know what preempted there. I should have tried to look that up. Why that was there in the first place.
Well, all this to say, we're glad that we're starting to see some change where these little windows that help you see the food in the box, well, we don't really need that, right? We can just keep it a straight cardboard box.
Which is fully recyclable. So.
Yay!
Yay.
Right.
Good
Great
news.
Great news. Okay. Well, Rachel, that's going to do it for this episode. So, listeners, we hope that we've offered a little more clarity about how to recycle properly in Tuscarawas County. But if you have any questions that you'd like us to address on the podcast, you can email them to WJER@WJER.com, and we'll do our very best to get answers and offer explanations to help you understand the process better, because when we know better, we do better. I'm Hannah Hartman.
And I'm Rachel Rodacher.
And we'll talk more trash on the next episode of Talkin Trash.